Mom, I need help. This date feels wrong. 27-year-old Ella Mathis sent that text from a restaurant bathroom in Dallas, staring at herself in the mirror, emerald dress, perfect makeup, and a sick feeling in her stomach that wouldn't go away. She was on a dinner date with her ex-boyfriend Evan, the same Evan who'd cheated on her 2 months ago, the same Evan her mother insisted deserved a second chance. Her mother texted back, "You're being dramatic. Go back out there and be gracious." So Ella did what she'd always done. She obeyed. She walked back to that table, sat down across from a man who'd betrayed her, and tried to smile through her discomfort. But someone else in that restaurant was watching, a Korean businessman named Kim Songjin, sitting 3 tables away, nursing a whiskey and pretending to read emails on his phone. And when he saw Evan grab Ella's wrist hard enough to make her go still, Songjin stopped pretending. What happened next would force Ella to choose between her mother's expectations and her own survival. But to understand how she ended up at that table, we need to go back 3 weeks to the phone call that started everything. 3 weeks earlier, Ella sat curled up on her couch in her Houston apartment, staring at her iPhone as it lit up for the 5th time that evening. Mom. Again. She'd been ignoring the calls all week, ever since she'd ended things with Evan. Ever since she'd finally drawn a line she refused to cross. On her coffee table sat a half-empty bottle of Barefoot Moscato and her MacBook Air, open to a marketing proposal she'd been trying to focus on for the past 2 hours. A Target throw blanket was wrapped around her shoulders, even though it was 70 degrees outside. Comfort. She needed comfort. When the phone rang for the 6th time, Ella finally answered. "Ella Marie Mathis, why have you been avoiding me?" Her mother's voice carried that particular blend of hurt and accusation that always made Ella's chest tighten. "I haven't been avoiding you, Mom. I've just been busy with work." "Too busy to tell your own mother that you broke up with Evan?" Silence. "Linda called me yesterday," Rosie continued. "She was in tears, Ella. Tears. Her son came to her house, devastated, saying you ended things without even giving him a chance to explain." Ella closed her eyes. Of course Evan had gotten to her mother first. Of course he'd controlled the narrative. "He cheated on me, Mom. People make mistakes, baby. Don't you think?" "No." Ella's voice was quiet but firm. "I don't think. He made a choice, and I made mine. But here's the thing about mothers. They know exactly which wounds to press when they're desperate. I'm not saying you have to marry him," Rosie said softly. "I'm just saying, baby, you're 27, and I've watched you go through so many relationships that didn't work out." Ella could recite the list in her sleep. Philip, who'd talked about marriage for 6 months before admitting he wasn't ready for commitment. David, who'd emotionally checked out 3 months before he finally said the words. Tyler, whose idea of a future together was, "Let's just see where things go for 2 years." 2 years. "Evan is different," Rosie pressed. "He has a good job. He comes from a good family. Linda and I have known each other since college, you know that. These are good people, Ella. And good men who actually want commitment are hard to find. He cheated on me, Mom." Ella repeated the words slowly, willing her mother to hear them. Really hear them. "He made a mistake. One mistake. Don't you think everyone deserves a second chance?" And there it was. The question that would change everything. The text messages had appeared on Evan's phone 2 weeks before this conversation. Ella had been at his uptown Dallas apartment, using his iPhone to order Uber Eats while hers charged in the bedroom. The notification had popped up at the top of the screen. "Stephanie. Work. Can't wait to see you Friday. Should I bring the wine, or are you handling everything?" Ella's thumb had hesitated over the screen. Then she'd opened the thread. 3 months of messages. Hotel names. Emojis that made her stomach turn. Plans that overlapped with nights Evan had told her he was working late on a client proposal. When she'd confronted him, he'd cycled through every line in the cheater's playbook. Denial first. Then minimization. It didn't mean anything, Ella. It was just stress relief. That's what he'd called it, stress relief. Ella had packed her purse, called an Uber, and delivered her decision in the calm, clear voice of someone who'd finally learned to recognize patterns. "We're done. I need you to respect that." She'd meant it. She'd really meant it. Until her mother got involved. 2 days after that phone call with Rosie, Evan showed up at her mother's house in Houston's 3rd Ward. He brought roses from Whole Foods, the expensive kind, wrapped in brown paper with a silk ribbon. Rosie let him in. "Mrs. Mathis, I know I don't deserve your time," Evan had said, deploying every ounce of the charm that had fooled Ella for 4 months. "But I need you to know I made the biggest mistake of my life. I hurt your daughter, and that's something I'll regret for the rest of my days." He'd sat in Rosie's living room, in the same chair Ella's father used to occupy before his heart attack 7 years ago, and he'd talked about redemption, about growth, about how sometimes people need to lose something precious to realize its value. "I love Ella," he'd said, looking Rosie directly in the eyes. "And I know that if I could just talk to her, face to face, I could show her that I've learned from this, that I'll never take her for granted again." Rosie had listened, and in Evan's earnest performance, she'd heard everything she wanted to hear, that her daughter's relationship could be saved, that there could still be a wedding, grandchildren. The future she'd been dreaming about since Ella turned 25. That night, Rosie had called Ella, and the night after that, and the night after that. "Just one dinner," she'd pleaded. "Just hear him out properly. You owe him that much closure, don't you? You owe yourself the chance to walk away, knowing you gave him a fair hearing. You owe him. You owe yourself." The language of obligation, wrapped in the language of care. By the 3rd day of calls, Ella was exhausted. Exhausted from defending her decision. Exhausted from managing her mother's disappointment. Exhausted from wondering if maybe, just maybe, she was being too rigid, too unforgiving, too difficult. So she'd agreed. One dinner, at the Monarch in Dallas. Saturday at 7 p.m. Just to end the conversation. Just to make her mother stop crying on the phone. Just to prove to everyone, including herself, that she'd tried. Before we see how this stranger changed everything, kindly hit the subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because this story is about recognizing when the wrong rescue becomes the right one. Ella had just returned from the bathroom, her phone clutched in her hand, her mother's dismissive text still burning in her mind. She slid back into her seat across from Evan, forcing herself to smile, to do what she'd always done, make herself smaller to keep the peace. But someone else in that restaurant had been watching. Kim Songjin had noticed Ella the moment she'd arrived, the emerald dress, the nervous energy, the way her composure shifted when Evan showed up late. He'd watched her excuse herself to the bathroom, watched her check her phone with desperate hope, watched her shoulders fall when she read whatever message had come through. And now, as Evan reached across the table to grab her wrist, his fingers tight, possessive, his voice low with warning, Songjin stopped pretending to review emails on his phone. He stood, straightened his Tom Ford jacket, and walked toward their table with the calm, controlled presence of a man who'd made a decision. "Ella Mathis?" She looked up to find a man standing beside their table. Tall, impeccably dressed, with dark eyes that held something she couldn't quite name. Not anger, not pity. Something. Deliberate. "I'm Kim Songjin," he said smoothly, extending his hand. "We met at the digital marketing conference in Austin last month. I've been meaning to reach out about that case study we discussed." Ella's mind went blank. She'd never been to a marketing conference in Austin. She'd never seen this man before in her life. But she understood what he was offering. An exit, a story, a way out that wouldn't require her to make a scene. "Oh," she heard herself say, pulling her wrist free from Evan's loosened grip. "Yes, the conference." Evan's face darkened. "We're actually in the middle of dinner." "I apologize for the interruption," Songjin said, his tone polite but utterly unmoved by Evan's territorial display. "But I'm heading out now, and I have those materials in my car. It'll only take a moment." He looked at Ella, and his voice softened just slightly. "If you have time?" It was the "if you have time" that did it, the way he made it a question, the way he gave her the choice. Ella stood up, grabbing her Michael Kors purse from the back of her chair. "I should get those materials. I've been waiting for them." "Ella," Evan's voice carried a warning. "Sit down." She didn't. Songjin stepped aside, allowing her to move past him, and she caught the faintest scent of expensive cologne, something woodsy and clean. As they walked toward the exit, she could feel Evan's eyes burning into her back, could imagine him calculating whether to follow, whether to make a scene. He didn't. Whatever he saw in Songjin's calm, controlled presence made him stay in his seat. The Dallas evening air hit Ella's face like a permission slip to breathe. Her phone started buzzing immediately. text after text lighting up her screen. Mom, where are you going? Ella, who is that man? Are you seriously leaving your date for a stranger? Ella Marie Mathis, answer me. Do you need a moment? Songjin asked, his voice carrying none of the urgency vibrating through her phone. Ella silenced it and dropped it into her purse. No, I need to not be here. They walked 2 blocks to where a black Mercedes S-Class waited at the curb. Songjin opened the passenger door, then paused. I can call you an Uber, he said quietly. Or I can drive you home. Your choice. But I won't leave you here if you don't feel safe. There it was again. The choice. The permission to decide. Can you just drive? Ella said. I don't care where. I just can't go home yet. For the first 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. Songjin drove with the same controlled precision he'd used at the restaurant, smooth, unhurried, completely present. Classical music played softly through the speakers. Something by Chopin, Ella thought, though she couldn't be sure. Finally, he asked, Are you safe? Not, are you okay? Not, what was that about? Just, are you safe? And something about that question, about the way it cut through all the performance and got straight to what mattered, broke something loose in Ella's chest. She laughed, not a happy laugh, the exhausted, slightly unhinged laugh of someone who's been pushed past their limit. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't know if I'm safe. I don't know if I just made the stupidest decision of my life, getting in a car with a complete stranger. I don't know why my mother thinks I owe a cheater a second chance. I don't know why saying no isn't enough. Songjin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 3 years ago, my cousin Minji called me. She was being pressured into a marriage she didn't want. To someone in our family's business who had a reputation for violence. She asked me to help her leave. He paused at a red light, his hands steady on the wheel. I told her I'd figure something out, that I'd call her back after a meeting. I was 12 hours too late. His voice didn't waver, but Ella could hear the weight behind the words. She tried to take her own life rather than go through with it. She's been in a coma ever since. Ella's breath caught. I saw you texting under the table, Songjin continued softly. I saw your shoulders, the way you made yourself smaller every time he spoke. I saw him grab your wrist. He glanced at her briefly. I couldn't walk past that again. The car fell silent except for Chopin and the soft hum of the engine. I'm not asking you to trust me, Songjin said. But I'm asking you to let me make sure you get home safely. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, setting it gently in the cup holder between them. My number's there, no obligation, no expectation. Just, if you want to talk to someone who gets it. Ella picked up the card. Embossed letters. Heavy stock. Kim Songjin. Import, export operations. Thank you, she whispered. You don't have to thank me for doing what should have been done 20 minutes earlier, he said quietly. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Ella felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. The problem with being rescued by a stranger is that you have to go home and explain it to everyone who thinks they know better. Ella woke up Sunday morning to the sound of someone pounding on her apartment door. She checked her phone, 8:47 a.m. 17 missed calls from her mother. 12 text messages she hadn't had the energy to read last night. She knew who was at the door before she opened it. Rosie stood in the hallway, still in her church clothes from early service, her face a mixture of fury and fear that only a mother can manage simultaneously. Ella Marie Mathis. Her mother's voice was low, controlled the kind of calm that meant she was anything but. We need to talk. Now. Ella stepped aside, letting her mother into the apartment. Who is he? Rosie demanded before Ella could even close the door. Who is this man you left with last night? Do you have any idea how that looked? How worried I was. I texted you that I was fine. You got into a car with a complete stranger, Ella. A stranger. While you were supposed to be having dinner with Evan, a man you've known for months, a man whose family we know. A man who cheated on me, Ella interrupted quietly. A man who grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave a mark when I tried to pull away. Rosie paused, but only for a moment. Linda called me last night, 3 times. She said Evan was humiliated, that you left him sitting there alone while you walked out with some Asian businessman who interrupted your dinner. His name is Kim Songjin, and he didn't interrupt, he rescued me. Rescued you? Rosie's voice rose. From what? From a man trying to apologize? From someone who made one mistake and wants to make it right? And there it was, the same script, the same pressure. Ella felt something shift inside her chest, a boundary forming, hardening. "You loved Evan because he made you comfortable, Mom," she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "Because his family looked like success to you. Because Linda is your friend, and having me date her son meant you had something to talk about at church besides everyone else's grandchildren." Rosie's face went pale. "That's not fair. You never once asked me if he made me happy," Ella continued. "You asked if he was serious about commitment, if he had a good job, if his family had good values, but you never asked if I felt safe with him, if I felt seen, if I felt like I could be myself. I was trying to protect you." "From what? From being alone?" Ella's voice cracked slightly. "Mom, I watched you fall apart when Daddy died. I watched you lose yourself, because your entire identity was wrapped up in being his wife. And I love you, God. I love you so much, but I won't build my life that way. I won't sacrifice who I am just to avoid disappointing you." The silence that followed was deafening. Rosie's eyes filled with tears. "So I'm the villain now? For wanting my daughter to have security? For not wanting you to end up alone at 40? "You're not the villain," Ella said softly. "But you're not listening to me either. I need you to trust that I know what's right for my life, even when it doesn't look like what you expected." Rosie picked up her purse with trembling hands. "I can't do this right now. I can't." She left without another word. The door closed quietly behind her, which somehow felt worse than if she'd slammed it. Ella stood in her living room, still in her pajamas, and wondered if she'd just destroyed the most important relationship in her life. 3 days passed. 3 days of Ella staring at Songjin's business card propped against her Keurig coffee maker. 3 days of picking up her phone, pulling up a new text message, and then setting it back down. What was she supposed to say? "Thanks for rescuing me from my disaster date. Want to grab coffee?" It sounded insane. She didn't know this man. Didn't know anything about him except that he'd lost someone he loved and apparently had impeccable timing. Work didn't help. Her creative director had been acting strange all week, taking calls in the conference room with the door closed, updating his LinkedIn profile when he thought no one was looking. And the Lexus campaign pitch was in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to finalize a presentation that was supposed to showcase their entire team's capabilities. By Friday evening, Ella sat on her couch with a glass of Chardonnay and Songjin's card in her hand. Her mother hadn't called. Not once. The silence felt like its own kind of punishment. She thought about Minji. About being trapped. About waiting too long. Before she could talk herself out of it, she typed, "This is Ella Mathis from the restaurant. Are you free for coffee?" She hit send before her anxiety could stop her. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "I thought you'd forgotten about me. Saturday, 2 p.m.? I know a quiet place in Dallas. I'll text you the address." Ella stared at the message, her heart pounding in a way that felt nothing like fear and everything like possibility. Maybe making the right choice wasn't supposed to feel safe. Maybe it was supposed to feel like this, uncertain and terrifying and somehow exactly what she needed. Have you ever had to choose between your own truth and your mother's expectations? Drop a comment and share your experience with us. First dates are supposed to be about favorite movies and travel dreams, not about dead cousins and the weight of inherited obligations. But then again, Ella thought as she pulled into the parking lot of Cafe Seoul in Dallas's Koreatown, nothing about meeting Kim Songjin had been typical from the start. The cafe was tucked between a Korean grocery store and a skincare shop, its minimalist storefront almost easy to miss. Inside, floor-to-ceiling windows let in afternoon light that made everything feel warm and unhurried. The scent of fresh brewed coffee mixed with something sweet, maybe honey bread or red bean pastries. Songjin was already there, sitting at a corner table near the window. He stood when he saw her, and Ella noticed he'd dressed differently than at the restaurant. Still expensive, the kind of casually perfect that comes from brands like Brunello Cucinelli, but softer somehow. A charcoal sweater, dark jeans, no suit jacket, no tie. Just a man waiting for coffee. "You found it okay?" he asked as she approached. "GPS is a wonderful thing," Ella said, settling into the chair across from him. A small smile touched his lips. "I thought about suggesting Starbucks, but this place has better coffee. And fewer people." "Fewer people who might know me, you mean?" "Fewer people who might interrupt us," he corrected gently. They started safe. Work, mostly. Ella talked about her marketing firm in Houston, the campaigns she was developing, the pitch for Lexus that was keeping her up at night. Songjin listened in a way that felt different from every other date she'd been on. No checking his Apple Watch, no glancing at his phone, no waiting for his turn to talk about himself. He asked questions that showed he was actually paying attention. What drew you to marketing? Was it always the plan? My father, Ella found herself saying. He worked in advertising before he passed. Used to say that good marketing doesn't sell products. It tells people a story about who they could be. She paused. I guess I wanted to keep telling stories. Songjin nodded slowly. 7 years ago, you said? In the car? She was surprised he remembered. Heart attack. He was only 53. I'm sorry. 2 words. Simple. But he didn't follow them with platitudes about time healing, or everything happening for a reason. Just acknowledgement. Just presence. What about you? Ella asked, grateful to shift focus. Import, export operations. What does that actually mean? It means, Songjin said carefully, that my family moves products between countries, primarily between South Korea and the United States. Legitimate business, mostly. Electronics, automotive parts, textiles. He paused. The company started in Seoul. My father built it from nothing. I was supposed to expand the American operations after I graduated from UT Austin. Supposed to? It was never really a choice. He said quietly, in my family, duty comes before preference. You inherit the business. You fulfill expectations. You don't ask what you want. You ask what's needed. Ella recognized the weight in those words. That sounds lonely. It is. Songjin met her eyes. Minji, my cousin, she understood that. She was being pressured into an arranged marriage with someone in our extended business network, a man with a temper, with a reputation. His hands tightened slightly around his coffee cup. She called me, asked for help, and I told her I'd figure something out after a meeting. I had some contract negotiation I thought was important. His voice went flat. By the time I got to her, she'd tried to end her life. She's been in a coma for 3 years. The doctors say she'll probably never wake up. The silence between them felt heavy but not uncomfortable. My mother hasn't spoken to me in 5 days, Ella said finally, because I chose myself instead of the man she wanted me to marry. Because I walked away from Evan instead of giving him another chance. Because I'm not following the script she wrote for my life. Do you regret it? Walking away from Evan? No. Ella traced the rim of her coffee cup. But disappointing my mother? That part kills me. She lost my father and rebuilt her entire identity around being my mother. And now I'm pulling away, and she thinks I'm abandoning her. You're not abandoning her, Songjin said quietly. You're just refusing to abandon yourself. Something in Ella's chest cracked open at those words. 4 hours passed like 4 minutes. The cafe staff started stacking chairs on tables, and Ella realized with a start that the sun had set outside the windows. Songjin walked her to her car, a Honda Accord she'd been driving since college, suddenly feeling very ordinary next to his Mercedes parked 2 spots away. Can I see you again? He asked. No games. No, I'll text you, without meaning it. Just a direct question. I'd like that, Ella said. And she meant it. Dating is complicated enough without your ex-boyfriend showing up drunk in a parking garage, with a grudge and 3 witnesses. But Ella was getting ahead of herself. 3 weeks into seeing Songjin, and she'd learned things about him that made her previous relationships feel like practice runs. He texted her good morning every day, not with emojis or memes, but with actual words. He remembered she didn't like cilantro. He asked about her Lexus pitch the way some men asked about the weather, genuinely interested, actually listening to her answers. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Dinner twice a week, long phone calls on the nights they didn't see each other. The kind of slow-building chemistry that felt more grown-up than anything Ella had experienced before. And then, 4 days before her biggest presentation of the year, everything fell apart. Ella arrived at work Monday morning to find her creative director's office empty. Not just empty, cleared out. His diplomas were gone from the wall. His Keurig was missing from the credenza. Even his collection of design books had vanished. Her boss called an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. Matu accepted a position with Sterling and Associates, he said, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. Effective immediately. Sterling and Associates, their biggest competitor. And Matu had been the lead on the Lexus presentation, the one scheduled for Friday afternoon. The one that could make or break Ella's chance at a promotion to senior executive. 4 days. She had 4 days to rebuild a presentation that was supposed to showcase their entire creative team's capabilities. By Wednesday afternoon, Ella sat in her apartment surrounded by presentation boards, her MacBook open to a PowerPoint that felt more like a death sentence than a career opportunity. Her printer had jammed twice. She'd spilled coffee on her notes. She stared at her phone. At Songjin's contact information. He had connections, business contacts across Texas, people who could probably make a few calls, smooth some paths, maybe even get the Lexus executives predisposed to say yes. But that wasn't who she wanted to be. That wasn't the woman her father had raised. Still, she called him. Ella? Songjin answered on the second ring. Everything okay? And God, wasn't that the question? She told him everything. About Matthew. About the presentation. About the fact that half her pitch had been built around industry connections she no longer had access to. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then Songjin asked, "Do you want me to make calls? Or do you want me to help you figure out how to do this yourself?" Ella closed her eyes. Of course. Of course he wouldn't just swoop in and fix it. Of course he'd give her the choice. "Help me figure it out," she whispered. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Songjin showed up with his laptop, a notepad, and 3 hours of his undivided attention. He didn't tell her what to do. He asked questions, challenged her assumptions, pushed her to own her vision instead of hiding behind Matu's reputation. "What made you want this account?" he asked. "The brand story," Ella said. "Lexus isn't just selling cars, they're selling craftsmanship, attention to detail, the idea that luxury should be accessible, not exclusive. So tell them that story. Your way, not Matu's way." By the time Ella walked into that conference room Friday afternoon, she owned every word of her presentation, every slide, every strategic recommendation. And when the Lexus executives said yes, when they specifically mentioned her fresh perspective and authentic passion for the brand, Ella knew she'd earned it. That evening, Songjin picked up Thai food from Ella's favorite restaurant in Houston. They sat on her apartment floor, eating pad thai straight from the containers, and Ella felt lighter than she had in months. "Thank you," she said, "for not just fixing it for me." "You didn't need fixing," Songjin said simply. "You just needed someone to remind you what you're capable of." They were still laughing about her boss's face when she'd nailed the closing statement, when Ella heard shouting from the parking garage below her window. Her blood went cold. She knew that voice. Evan stood in the parking garage, clearly drunk, his expensive suit rumpled and his eyes wild. He'd been waiting, watching. 3 weeks, he slurred as Ella and Songjin stepped out of the building's entrance. 3 weeks of you ignoring my calls, my texts, my apologies. For him? The racial slur that followed made Ella's stomach turn. Songjin stepped slightly in front of her, his body language shifting into something Ella had never seen before. Controlled, dangerous, completely calm. "Evan, you need to leave," Ella said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need to leave?" Evan laughed bitterly. He lunged forward, grabbing Ella's wrist hard enough to make her gasp. "You humiliated me. Left me sitting in that restaurant like some—" He didn't finish the sentence. Songjin's hand was on Evan's wrist, his grip precise and unyielding. "Let her go. Now." Evan released her, stumbling back. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Songjin pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then pocketed it again. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Someone you don't want to know." Within 15 minutes, 3 men in dark suits appeared. Professional, efficient, terrifying in their politeness. "Mr. Vinson," one of them said. "We're going to escort you home safely. Please come with us." Evan looked at Songjin, and something in his face changed. Recognition. Fear. He went with them without another word. Ella stood in that parking garage, her wrist throbbing where Evan had grabbed her, and looked at the man she'd been dating for 3 weeks. "Songjin," she said quietly. "What just happened?" He met her eyes. "We should talk. There's a difference between knowing someone has secrets and knowing exactly what those secrets cost." They went back upstairs to Ella's apartment. She made tea, chamomile from her Keurig, because she needed something to do with her hands. Songjin sat at her small kitchen table, his shoulders tense in a way she'd never seen before. "I need you to be honest with me," Ella said, setting a mug in front of him. "Those men, the way Evan looked at you, what just happened?" Songjin didn't deflect, didn't minimize. He met her eyes and told her the truth. "My family's business is import-export. That part is real. We move legitimate products, electronics, automotive parts, textiles between South Korea and the United States." He paused. "But we also move money. We facilitate connections between people who need things done quietly. Political favors. Financial arrangements that blur legal lines." Ella's hand tightened around her mug. "I'm the heir to something I didn't build but can't walk away from." Songjin continued. "My father started this operation 30 years ago in Seoul, built it from nothing. And in our world, family loyalty isn't a choice, it's survival." "And Evan?" Ella's voice was steadier than she felt. "Those men work for my family. When I need something handled discreetly, they handle it. Evan won't bother you again. He understands the cost of making that mistake twice." The words hung in the air between them. "I need you to see it," Songjin said quietly. "The whole picture. Not just what I tell you, but what I actually do." Sunday morning, Songjin picked Ella up in his Mercedes and drove to the Houston port. The warehouse sat among dozens of others, industrial, unremarkable, with the family company name in English and Korean on a modest sign out front. Inside, it looked exactly like what Songjin had described: shipping containers, forklifts, workers in safety vests checking manifests on tablets. Everything legitimate, everything traceable. Then he took her to a back office where an older Korean man sat reviewing paperwork. He stood when they entered, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Ella, this is Mr. Park. He manages operations here and other aspects of the family business." Mr. Park bowed slightly. "Miss Mathis, it's good to finally meet you. Songjin speaks highly of you." "Mr. Park has been with my family since I was a child," Songjin said. "He knew my cousin Minji. He's the one who found her after." His voice trailed off. Mr. Park's expression softened. "You care for her," he said to Ella. "I can see that. And he cares for you. That is rare in this life." Songjin showed her the computers that tracked both kinds of shipments, the ones that went through customs with full documentation and the ones that moved through more carefully constructed channels, the financial systems that looked clean on paper but served purposes she could only guess at. "This is who I am, Ella," Songjin said, as they stood in his office overlooking the warehouse floor. "I can walk away from you if this is too much. I'd understand. But I can't walk away from my family. This is my inheritance, my obligation, my cage." Ella looked at him, at this man who'd rescued her from one trap only to reveal he lived in another. "I need time," she whispered. "To think, to process." "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." 7 days passed. 7 days of Ella not calling, not texting, not knowing what she wanted. She met her best friend Maya for brunch at a cafe in Houston. Maya, who'd known her since college, who'd witnessed every failed relationship, every broken promise. "So let me get this straight," Maya said, stirring her mimosa with a straw. "He's basically a Korean mafia, but he's honest about it. He helped you nail your presentation without taking credit, and he handled your psycho ex without you even asking. That's a simplified version, but yes. And you're scared because? Because his world is dangerous, Maya. Because people in his life end up in comas. Because dating him means accepting things I don't fully understand." Maya set down her drink. "Ella, honey, you spent 4 months with Evan and you never felt safe enough to tell him no. You've known Songjin for a month, and he literally asked if you wanted him to solve your problem or help you solve it yourself. Which one actually saw you?" The question sat in Ella's chest like a weight. That evening, her phone rang. "Mom." "Ella." Rosie's voice was tight. "Linda called me today. She's heard things. About this man you're seeing. About his connections. Is it true?" "Is what true, Mom?" "That he's involved in criminal activity. That he's dangerous." Ella closed her eyes. "He's complicated. His life is complicated. But he's been more honest with me than any man I've ever dated. Honest about being a criminal isn't a virtue, Ella Marie. Neither is pressuring your daughter to stay with a man who cheated on her," Ella said quietly. I have to go, Mom. She hung up before Rosie could respond. For a long time, Ella sat on her couch, staring at her phone, at Songjin's contact information. She thought about safety, about authenticity, about the difference between a man who told comfortable lies and a man who offered difficult truths. She typed, "Can we talk?" His response came within seconds. "Always. Where?" "Your place. I'm ready to see the rest." When Songjin opened his door, Ella didn't wait for small talk. "I'm terrified," she said, "of your world, of what it means to be with you, of losing myself in something I can't control." He nodded slowly. "I understand. But I'm more terrified of the safe choice," she continued, "of spending my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to choose the man who actually sees me, even if he lives in shadows." Songjin's expression shifted. Relief. Hope. Something deeper. "I need you to understand what you're choosing," he said carefully. "I know exactly what I'm choosing," Ella said. "I'm choosing truth over comfort. I'm choosing you. Kindly tell us in the comments, would you choose dangerous truth over safe lies? Because this next part changes everything. And if you're invested in Ella and Songjin's story, hit that like button and subscribe to help our community. We read every comment, and your support means everything. The thing about drawing boundaries with your mother is that she raised you. She knows exactly which buttons to push when she's desperate. Ella was folding laundry in her apartment on a Saturday afternoon, her Spotify playlist humming softly through her speaker, when someone knocked on her door. Not a gentle knock, the kind that meant business. Ella looked through the peephole and her stomach dropped. "Mom." Rosie stood in the hallway, her church purse clutched tight against her side, her face a mixture of hurt and fury that only a mother can perfect. "We need to talk," Rosie said the moment Ella opened the door. "Right now." Ella stepped aside, letting her mother in. "Linda called me yesterday," Rosie started, not bothering with pleasantries. "She told me everything, about this man you're seeing, about his business." She spat the word like poison. "Are you out of your mind, Ella? Throwing away Evan, a good man from a good family, for some fling with a criminal?" "He's not a criminal, Mom. He runs an illegal operation." Rosie's voice rose. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't know what import-export with connections means?" Ella's jaw tightened. "What it means is that his life is complicated, but he's been honest with me about every part of it, which is more than Evan ever was. Evan made one mistake. Evan cheated, Mom. And then he manipulated you into guilt, tripping me into seeing him again. That's not one mistake, that's a pattern." Rosie's hands trembled as she set her purse on Ella's kitchen counter. "You're 27 years old, Ella. Do you know what that means? Every woman at church is asking me when you're getting married, when I'm going to have grandchildren. And I have to stand there and smile while they talk about their daughters' engagement parties and baby showers." There it was, the truth beneath the anger. "So this is about you," Ella said softly. "About what you need, what makes you comfortable. Don't you dare make me the villain for wanting my daughter to have security. You never once asked if Evan made me happy," Ella interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears building behind her eyes. "You asked if he had a good job, if his family had good values, if he was serious about commitment, but you never asked if I felt safe with him, if I felt seen." Rosie's face crumpled. "I was trying to protect you from ending up alone." "Like you?" The words came out sharper than Ella intended. "Mom, I watched you lose yourself when Daddy died. Your whole identity was wrapped up in being his wife. And when he was gone, you didn't know who you were anymore." The silence that followed was devastating. "So, now I'm pathetic?" Rosie whispered. "Is that what you think of me?" "I think you're scared," Ella said, her voice breaking. "And I understand that, but I won't build my life around your fear." Rosie picked up her purse, her hands shaking. "What's so special about this Korean man anyway? What does he give you that Evan couldn't?" Ella met her mother's eyes. "He asks what I want. He listens when I say no. He doesn't need me to be smaller so he can feel bigger." "So, I raised you to be selfish," Rosie said, tears streaming down her face now. "To be ungrateful, to throw away everything I sacrificed to give you. You raised me to know my worth," Ella said quietly. "You just don't like that I'm using it." Rosie turned toward the door, then stopped. "Don't call me when this blows up in your face. When you realize that choosing some dangerous man over your family was the biggest mistake of your life." The door closed behind her. Not a slam. Just a quiet, final click. Ella stood in her empty apartment, her whole body shaking, and wondered if she'd just lost her mother for good. 20 minutes later, there was a softer knock. She opened it to find Songjin. He didn't ask what happened. He'd seen Rosie leave in tears. He just pulled Ella into his arms and let her break. "Boundaries are love too," he murmured into her hair, "even when they hurt." 3 weeks passed. Rosie didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at church functions where she knew Ella would be. The silence felt like its own kind of grief. But Ella kept choosing herself, kept building a life that was hers, not her mother's script. And Songjin stayed, through every doubt, every tear, every moment she wondered if she'd made the right choice. Until the night his phone rang with a call from Seoul. And everything changed again. Love is easy when you're in the same city. But what happens when Seoul calls and duty demands an answer? 6 months into their relationship, Ella and Songjin had built something she'd never experienced before. Real intimacy, real partnership. The kind of love that didn't require her to shrink or perform or pretend. They'd fallen into rhythms that felt like home. Saturday morning coffee runs to Starbucks before heading to Café Seoul. Tuesday night dinners at her apartment where he'd chop vegetables while she worked on presentations at her kitchen table. Quiet evenings on his couch in Dallas, her feet in his lap while they watched Netflix and said nothing at all. It was the kind of ordinary that felt extraordinary, precisely because it was real. Until the night his phone rang at 11 p.m. Ella was at Songjin's apartment, wearing one of his UT Austin t-shirts and scrolling through Instagram on her iPhone while he finished some emails. His phone lit up with a call, the screen displaying Korean characters she couldn't read. She watched his face change as he answered, watched the color drain from his expression. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes, all in Korean. His voice careful, respectful, with an edge of something Ella had never heard before. Fear. When he hung up, he sat motionless for a long moment. "My father had a stroke," he said finally. "He's stable, but there's damage. The doctors say he can't manage the business anymore." Ella set down her phone. "I'm so sorry. There's a power struggle starting in Seoul. My uncle wants to take control. Others are positioning themselves." Songjin's hands tightened around his phone. "I have to go back. To stabilize things. To keep the organization from tearing itself apart." "For how long?" 6 months. Maybe a year. He met her eyes. "Maybe permanently." The words sat between them like a third presence in the room. The next 48 hours moved too fast. Songjin booked a flight to Seoul departing Sunday evening, made calls to Houston and Dallas contacts, delegating operations. Packed a suitcase with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of travel. Saturday night, he picked up Ella in his Mercedes and drove to Reunion Tower in downtown Dallas. They took the elevator to the observation deck, the city spreading out beneath them in a glittering grid of lights. The Omni Hotel glowed to the south. The Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge arched over the Trinity River like a silver ribbon. "I need to tell you something," Songjin said, his hands steady on the railing. "My father wants me in Korea permanently. He's convinced the business needs restructuring from the top, and I'm the only one he trusts to do it." Ella's chest tightened. "I can negotiate," he continued. 6 months in Seoul, 6 months here. It would mean splitting my life between 2 continents. But I can make it work." He turned to face her fully. "I need to know if you see a future worth that negotiation. Because I can't do halfway with you, Ella. I won't ask you to wait if you're uncertain." Ella stared out at the Dallas skyline, at the life she'd built here. Her apartment, her job, the city where she'd finally learned to choose herself. And she thought about every man who'd come before Songjin. Matthew, who'd talked about marriage for 6 months before admitting he wasn't ready. David, who couldn't commit past the next dinner date. Tyler, whose version of forever was, "Let's just see what happens." Years of men who couldn't promise her next weekend, let alone next year. And here was Songjin, asking her to believe in a future across continents and time zones and complications she couldn't fully imagine. "I'm terrified," she said, her voice breaking. "Of your world, of the distance, of losing myself in something this big." He nodded slowly, accepting. "But I'm more terrified of the safe choice," Ella continued, tears streaming down her face now. Songjin's expression shifted. Relief. Hope. Love. "So yes," Ella whispered. "Yes to Seoul and Dallas. Yes to FaceTime calls at 3 a.m. Yes to building something together even when it's hard. Yes to you. He pulled her into his arms, and they stood there on that observation deck, two people choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. It wasn't a proposal. There was no ring, no bended knee. Just a promise, a commitment, a choice to build a future together with eyes wide open to the cost. Sunday evening, Ella drove Songjin to DFW Airport. They sat in the departure lane, and neither of them ready to say goodbye. "I'll call you when I land," he said. "It'll be Monday afternoon your time." 14-hour time difference, Ella said, trying to smile through tears. "I Googled it." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Then he was gone, disappearing into the terminal with his carry-on and the weight of an empire on his shoulders. Ella drove home through Dallas traffic, her phone already counting down the hours until his plane would land in Seoul. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to choose love without guarantees. 6 months. That's how long Ella learned that love isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about who you choose when circumstances are impossible. The first FaceTime call came at 3 a.m. Houston time, just as Songjin had promised. Ella answered with bleary eyes and bedhead, her iPhone propped against her Keurig while she made coffee she desperately needed. "You look beautiful," he said from 13 time zones away, and she laughed because she absolutely didn't. That became their rhythm. 3 a.m. calls before her workday started. Late-night messages when he was having morning coffee in Seoul. Care packages sent through Amazon and Korean postal services. Her favorite honey butter chips from H-Mart. His preferred ground coffee from a Houston roaster he missed. The distance was brutal, but they made it work. Songjin spent those 6 months stabilizing his father's organization, negotiating with his uncle, restructuring operations to ensure transparency where it mattered, and discretion where it didn't. His video calls came from hotel rooms and offices, always professional, always exhausted. "I'm making progress," he told her during week 6. "My father's agreeing to step back gradually. I think I can negotiate the split arrangement." "How much longer?" Ella asked, hating how needy she sounded. "Soon," he promised. "I'm fighting for us, I promise." Meanwhile, Ella's career was flourishing. The Lexus campaign she'd fought so hard for had exceeded every metric. By month 3 of Songjin's absence, her boss called her into his office and offered her the promotion she'd been working toward for 2 years. Senior executive. Her own team. A salary that made her mother's concerns about financial security feel almost laughable. She called Songjin immediately, forgetting it was 2 a.m. Seoul time. "I'm so proud of you," he said, voice thick with sleep and genuine joy. "You did this yourself, all of it." And she had, without his connections, without anyone's rescue. Just her own competence and her own voice. The call from her mother came on a Tuesday afternoon in month 4. Ella almost didn't answer. 3 months of silence had calcified into something that felt permanent. But when she saw Mom light up her iPhone screen, something made her press accept. "Ella." Rosie's voice was small, uncertain. "Can we talk? In person?" They met at the same Houston cafe where Rosie used to take Ella after church when she was a little girl. The same corner booth. The same menu featuring chicken salad sandwiches and sweet tea. Rosie looked older than Ella remembered. "I've been talking to my therapist," Rosie started, stirring Splenda into her coffee with shaking hands. "About your father, about losing him, about what I've been doing to you." Ella waited. "I was so afraid of being alone that I tried to control your life," Rosie continued, tears gathering in her eyes. "I convinced myself I was protecting you, but really, I was just terrified of losing the only person I have left." "Mom, let me finish, baby." Rosie reached across the table, stopping just short of Ella's hand. "I spoke to Songjin." Ella's breath caught. "What?" "He called me 2 weeks ago. From Seoul. Asked if he could have a conversation." Rosie's smile was watery. "He told me about his cousin. About why he helped you that night. About what he's building with you. He didn't have to do that. He said he wanted me to know that his intentions were honorable, that he understood a mother's concern." Rosie wiped her eyes with a Starbucks napkin. "Your father would have liked him. Songjin. He would have seen what I was too scared to see." They talked for 2 hours. The apology wasn't perfect. The wounds weren't fully healed. But it was a beginning. Boundaries with connection. Love with respect. When they stood to leave, Rosie hugged her daughter tight. I'm still learning, but I'm trying. That's all I need, Ella whispered. 2 months later, Ella stood in baggage claim at DFW Airport, her heart pounding as she watched passengers stream through the international arrivals gate. And then she saw him. Songjin, wheeling a suitcase and looking thinner than when he'd left, scanning the crowd until his eyes found hers. She ran. Actually ran through the airport like something out of a Hallmark movie, and he caught her, lifting her off her feet. 6 months in Seoul. 6 months here, he murmured into her hair. I negotiated it. My father agreed. We split the operations. You're staying? I'm staying, he confirmed. Well, half the year. Is that enough? Ella pulled back to look at him. It's everything. Saturday night, Songjin took her to the Monarch, the same upscale Dallas steakhouse where he'd first intervened, where Ella had texted her mother from a bathroom stall, desperate and trapped. Full circle. They sat at a different table this time, one near the window with a view of the Design District lights. They ordered wine, talked about Seoul and Houston, and the life they were building across 2 continents. And then, between the appetizer and entree, Songjin reached into his jacket pocket. The ring box was small. Velvet. Understated. I'm not asking you to be my wife in a world you didn't choose, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I'm asking you to build a world with me. One where you're safe, where you're chosen, where you're free to be exactly who you are. Ella's hands trembled as she looked at the ring, a simple diamond on a platinum band, elegant and unpretentious. This won't be easy, Songjin continued. My world is complicated. Time zones will be brutal. But I promise you honesty, partnership, a love that makes room for both of us. Yes, Ella said through tears. Yes, to all of it. He slipped the ring on her finger, and the restaurant erupted in applause from strangers who'd been watching. Later that night, Ella sat on her couch, her engagement ring catching the light, and called her mother. Mom, she said when Rosie answered. I said yes, and I want you there when we celebrate. There was a pause, then Rosie's tearful voice. I'd be honored, baby. I'd be so honored. Ella learned that sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one everyone expects, and sometimes choosing yourself means risking everything comfortable for something real. Have you ever had to choose between what felt safe and what felt true? Share your story in the comments below. We'll read every single one, and your voice matters here. If Ella and Songjin's journey touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to support this story. Because every woman deserves a love story that honors who she really is, not who she's expected to be.